everyone. Welcome to 1 o'clock. Time for some training. I'm Richard Carlton. And welcome to FMtrain.tv, where every day at 1 o'clock we're doing great things with the FileMaker platform. I'm really excited that you folks are here. I was looking at the list of people here, a bunch of people on Twitch as well and YouTube. And so real quick, what we want to do today is I want to answer some questions. I got Jacob Taylor here so we can take a wide variety of questions on things. But one of the things my ideas that's coming up is that we previously about a year ago covered the 30 days of basic FileMaker training. It's like boot camp for FileMaker, right? And one of the ideas that was kicked around on that, here it is right here. If you go to fmtrain.tv/30CRM, originally it was supposed to be 30 days of basic hacking a CRM to make it useful for you, but that rapidly turned into 30 days of what is FileMaker and how to do basic with it, right? And so while the CRM is useful, the starting point is very useful, the question is really more about just like basic stuff. And we had a lot of fun with it last year. And so what we want to do is kind of build this and do this again. Not so much for some of you. A lot of you here are very talented developers. You know who you are. It's Lynn, Ruben, Scott, all of you folks here, very talented. That being said, your thoughts or ideas about basic or intermediate training, type it in Discord. Let us know what you think. So the idea when we do training is that we're going to make you give you employable skill set and lead you towards the path of taking and passing the original certification test. All right, so topics and questions, right? So I got Jacob here today. I'm going to go through some basic stuff. I know a bunch of you are much more advanced. And so today is going to be stupid and somewhat non-interesting for you, but I want to go through some basic material as well as answer questions on that. And then Lynn, I know that you expressed an interest in this audit thing. Margaret is kind of crafting the audit out of a customer solution where I was playing with it a little bit, and she's putting it into the current light copy of Starting Point. And we will make sure you get a copy of that, but it's pretty basic. The idea. So here's my discovery so far, and part of this is a conversation I would have with you, is that FileMaker 23 came out, or 20 or whatever we want to call it, and they added some more kind of this audit logging kind of stuff. They had that transactional capability in there, but remember the transactions that were part of 19.6 are really transactions that have to do with a scripted process, not really an end user doing data entry, right? It's not really designed that way. There are possibilities of people doing end user audit trails, but that tech that's built, remember, it's all based in JSON. It was pretty advanced. I haven't seen a useful functional demo yet of the audit trail capability using FileMaker 23 yet, right? Has any of you seen that? Minimal audit stuff. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about the minimal audit stuff today. That's what we're going to do. One of the things we're going to do today. So I just want to say that I could use feedback, because if you don't give me feedback on here's what you have to understand. One is if you need something, other than if it's like really obscure, like if Ken wants to know how to install a cappuccino maker in a hot air balloon, that's way out on the edge of the knowledge space. But if you have a FileMaker question like, I don't understand I guarantee there's 100 other people just like you who don't understand, you have that question. And so if you repeat it to me, because the other 99 people are not going to say anything, they're just going to go about their business thinking that they're dumb and that no one cares or listens to them, which is not the truth. I really want to hear from people. So let me know what would be helpful for you in terms of what we could do to kind of re-go through this 90-day training for people. And we would set the topic. The topics would probably flow a lot like this, but what things do you not know how to do that you really like to know how to do? So one of the things with the lightweight audit trail that I came up with, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a copy of Starting Point I've got right here. There are two. Now, let's cover the PSOS wrapper thing today first. And I'm sure Nick has done this to a degree, but this was so revolutionary at the time, and it originally came out with FileMaker 13. The PSOS stuff, I think, was a 13 edition. Yeah, it was 13. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to hosts over here. I'm going to go to our DBW 13 file. I'm going to open up the Lite X3. Oh, and it's going to ask me for a password. This is bad. Okay, so this is a version of Starting Point. We are continuing to invest in Starting Point, just so all of you understand this. The investment specifically in all of them, but this one, I know that we worked on this one this week. It's already got some improvements in it. Just minor things to help brand new people. Once we continue to kind of de-Nickify it a little bit. A lot of you, I love Nick, but you understand what I'm saying. A lot of that Nick does is not good for beginners. The light version is for beginners and intermediate developers. So what I want to do is jump over here to contacts real quick. There's some sample data in here. And what I wanted to do is go up in the scripts workspace and just and talk about something briefly. It's there are some certain things that you might think are advanced that they're really kind of tools, not so much for a beginner, they're for the intermediate person. Let me talk about the progression of learning real quick as a reminder. And you folks are all in various spots in this progression of learning. This is the progression of learning. You have the person at the left here on screen left, the business owner. This is not necessarily a FileMaker developer at all. It's frequently a boss, and they manage FileMaker, but they don't know it from a hole in the ground, right? A lot of people, Claris are actually fit this role over here, right? Then you have people who are brand new developers who just want it to work. A lot of time when I do training, it's that level and then the intermediate level, which is where they can get it to work reliably, but the performance is kind of questionable. And that's where we get into this performance tuning thing. And then Nick hangs out in the space typically from about beyond intermediate to the senior ninja level, right? And when he does stuff, it's pretty advanced for the most part. So brand new developers just want it to work. Intermediate developers are concerned about performance. PSOS is all about performance, the idea of perform script on server. Basically, for those of you, and a lot of people are here, but you also understand that there's two ways of having FileMaker server run a script for you. Either it's on a schedule, it's called SASE, and that's Claris accepts that terminology. That was a term that my team invented when we did the DevCon presentation on it way back in the day. And then after that, they realized, well, they have a calendar, a schedule set for SASE. PSOS is to manually activate it. This right here is at a starting point. I'm going to comment this out right here. And, oh, hang on. Okay, I have to save my script on another computer. Margaret, can you talk for a second, or Jacob, talk? 1 second.
Hi, everybody. You have anything else to add, Jacob, to like what we're doing?
Nope, that's very funny though.
You saw the refresh, by the way. I saved it on the other, and I was wondering why this wasn't commented out. So here is the essential piece that Greg Lane did, and I never deliberately want to take credit for someone else's hard work. So this is Greg Lane here. And he is from Skeleton Key, or was at the time. I'm not sure where he's at these days, but he built this this blog that's talked about this idea of the PSOS wrapper, not DAPI wrapper, but a PSOS wrapper, right? And the idea was that if I just delete all this stuff. So you have a script that does a bunch of stuff, okay? What you can do is, if you have a script that does a bunch of stuff, imagine it's in this space right here, okay? And this is for all you intermediate developers out here. Unless Nick uses this, this is great. And what this does is it allows you to just glue the stuff on the front end right here and glue the stuff on the back end right here. So this is your code that you would normally execute. And what happens if you put this wrapper above it and a little piece below it, whenever you have a FileMaker client, it will attempt to have this code down here run on PSOS. It will attempt to run the code on PSOS for you. And if PSOS is not available for some reason, you're not on server, etc., you will come down here and run it locally yourself. So it's got a run it on PSOS if possible, fallback if required, right? How great is that? And so Greg, this is in our paid video training. Most of you have that, but there's so many videos in there, it's easy to get lost and not see this stuff. But this is an essential item as a developer to remember that PSOS is there to bail your out of dark, nasty holes where you have a performance problem, and maybe you didn't even write the code badly, it's just not fast. You have to do this work and you need it to run faster. You could get generally about 1,000%, 400 to 1,000% performance improvement depending. by using PSOS instead of running the thing locally, if not more. It saved my on a number of projects, even this last one with the helicopter people. It saved me because I had a script that took 11 seconds that was just too long, and I would have gone through and done some really funky Nick Hunter optimization, and I would rather not do that, right? I'd rather just take the code that I know that works and magically use my magic wand, Harry Potter magic wand, swish and flick, right, and have it run 10 times faster. And that's what I did. And so I swish and flicked it with PSOS, and it solved the problem. And I didn't have to rewrite it. I didn't have to go to Nick and go, God, Nick, I'm so stupid. You're so smart. How the hell do I make this go faster with your magical Nick juice, right? And that is the next step. If PSOS and other things you do won't solve the problem, a vast majority of the time, if you're thoughtful about what you're doing, PSOS will get you over the hump. You only have to go super Nick deep if you really get into a spot where fundamentally you need to really get, do unnatural abomination type things with FileMaker to get it to really run the speed you need it to, right? So David Angel says, using Docker desktop Windows, I can run FileMaker server on Docker. There's an open question there that's kind of
Sure.
advanced, right? I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I don't have an answer either. I'm going to say sure. David Angel, you should try it and tell me how it goes.
Right? Yeah.
I have not used Docker. I don't use Docker. That's a personal thing. It has nothing to do with RCC. But yeah, so.
Well, Docker, what does Docker do? It allows you to virtualize the hardware? Is it a virtualization?
Yeah, so Docker lets you put like individual applications or sometimes collections of applications inside of little bubbles on a computer. And so you can then use that to have many, many little bubbles on one computer hardware, right? You get one beefy server, get like one of them AMD EPYC processors or something like that. It's got way too many cores and a billion gigs of RAM or something. And then you can say, cool, I'm going to put like 170 FileMaker servers on the same machine, or, I don't know, whatever. That's really useful for management. It makes certain parts of like operations easier and stuff like that. It's great for all of those reasons. We primarily host in AWS or on actual like on-site server hardware with our clients, like as part of a hosting conversation. And so for the most part, I have no actual reason to deal with Docker. And I'm not like, I don't have like a development server on my computer that I need to, spin up and shut down when I'm trying something or stuff like that. So.
Well, yeah, Andy was replying back, says we created the container, was successful, but performance was awful. Just understand, I would say fundamentally, listen, a basic statement. Say that you take a middle of the road, what's a middle of the road server anymore on Amazon? Is it a T3A triple extra large or something, Jacob? What would be like a kind of a basic kind of server?
The T3 large is like the minimum for FMS these days. If it's like an AMD Intel, something like that, you want extra horsepower, start adding numbers and X's to it. So like a T3 2X large, for example, that is a step up from what 4 is.
Okay, so T3 2X large, let's talk about that briefly. So if I put FileMaker server on a T3 2X large, and I have, say we start loading it up with users and databases and backups and things like that. And then you actually can see the performance of the server. I don't want to say struggle, but you see it burn up 5 or 10% performance usage. If you see a FileMaker server using 5, 10, 20, 30% performance usage, you're probably a lot farther along towards 100% than not, because typically the way FileMaker works, it doesn't give you a lot of telemetry and a lot of feedback until it goes right to 100% and it redlines. Okay, it's the way that kind of engine works. And so keep in mind that if you start using 20, 30, even 40%, you think, oh, I've got another 50 or 60% available. You don't. Okay, you've used up most of it. So let's just say that you're using 40% of your server up and on a piece of hardware. People say, well, let's use Docker, use some other containerization. That doesn't magically solve. Like if you put 2 servers on that piece of hardware, right? Right? You put 2 FileMaker. So let's take that same size server and put 2 containers on it. I'm going to use 2 different FileMaker servers. That way my spread on 2 different servers. That doesn't magically solve the performance problem. It probably makes it worse. right? And so containerization is not necessarily a performance booster. It's a management tool. Claris wants to use it as a way of abstracting the operating system away so they don't have to deal with the operating system, right? So once again, that's a management kind of bug testing kind of thing. It's not a performance improvement. In fact, it probably would result in worse performance, but they're willing to pay that price so they don't have to code for Mac anymore or Windows anymore or whatever, right?
If you don't tune it, it can be worse. And I'll refer back to what stream was that? They demoed. That was for us, I think, right? That was like a partner thing. That's the thing I'm referring to is published on their website or whatever. So I'm not like revealing info or what, but like they demoed. There's a Docker script included in the Linux FileMaker server builds now, so that you can like take an installed copy of FileMaker server on one of the supported Ubuntu's, and I think it's specific to 2204 basically. But like again, qualifiers aside, and then you can say, hey, I want 3 WebDirect worker machines and 1 FileMaker server or whatever, right? Like, and the script will just build you your own little multi-server cloud on one physical piece of hardware somewhere. That's cool. That's awesome. I love it. It's great for testing. You can do all kinds of performance and that kind of stuff with this. And if you're in like you're launching things inside of a Kubernetes environment or something like that, where Docker would be, you can do some kind of cross compatibility thing there. That can be helpful actually. But 0 of our clients are even asking for things like that currently. So I think it is very useful for people who are newer to the platform, people who have experience with those tools, people who are in enterprise situations where that makes sense, like that kind of stuff. I don't know how much it actually applies to like our small to medium business customer base, basically. So
yeah, so there's a Claris support document here running FileMaker server in a Docker container, right? Ubuntu 2004. They also had a conversation over here with engineering on in a Linux containers. Linux
LXC.
container, LXC. So is that a competitor or a similar to Docker but different? Or
different technology set that kind of tries to accomplish the same thing. It's containers too. Docker's like a product, right? So it does containers. People know it from that. But like Docker themselves as a company, they made a product named Docker. They have what David Angel was asking about, which was Docker Desktop, which is like a graphical application for managing containers and stuff for like a regular user on your desktop computer or something like that. You can click and boom, launch containers and stuff. So and people pay them for that because that's valuable.
Docker seems good for running FMS on the same in the same computer.
Yep.
With Pro, I guess with Pro, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
That was what I said earlier. I as a personal thing, I have no usage for that to like launch a FileMaker server on my computer, so I can interact with it on Pro, on localhost, or something like that. Like that's a perfectly good thing to do for like a development server if you don't literally have development servers somewhere. RCC just has 2 of them hosted, one on each coast of the US. And so I don't have to do anything. If I want to throw a file up on a server somewhere, I have a server literally for that purpose, basically.
What does that server cost us? Are we about?
They're T3 larges. It's ours are on the ballpark of 100, probably 110 a month because they're Windows. Be cheaper if we did it on Linux, but yeah.
We probably could eventually switch to Linux on that. That would be the plan. All right, cool. So we got Jacob here. Questions on that? And that's Andy. So Andy, if you have thoughts or questions or there's things in FileMaker you don't understand that you're a heavy duty developer from another planet and you came to the world of FileMaker and everyone walks around on 4 limbs, right? They're not bipedal, right? So they're 4-pedal or whatever you want to call that. So I get that confusion. We also have people who are brand new who've never done programming at all, and they also have questions as well. So if you have questions, I know very different groups, and we probably address them differently, but those are the kinds of things. If you ask the questions, I'm happy to wrap a live stream around that for you, okay? Because we're going to be doing live streams regardless, so it might as well make it useful for you, right? That's kind of my thought process. So, and then general feedback, Lynn from Austin. So let's talk about the lightweight audit. So Lynn was asking about this. So first thing I want to do is talk about this the script here on this real quick. So We have the video on this, Margaret, the Greg Lane video. It was like 0943 or something like that. But the short version is that they published a blog article and talked about this script right here. So just real quick to go so you understand the mechanics of this script is that when this script runs, it can run on the script is set up to understand that it can run either on server or on a client, whatever the client is. And so what I did is we have a flag says yes, a preference. We want to use PSOS, right? And so we say yes and a preference on that. That's one thing. And then that we're looking for in the application version, the word server is there. So yes, we want to use PSOS. Yes, the current application, the host application is server, right? And then the pattern count, the get application version is not server, right? So this is basically saying it's pro, right? It's not server. So this is saying the server, it's I always hate negatives in a calculation because my brain thinks in terms of positives. But what we're saying is, yes, we want to use PSOS. Yes, the application is being hosted on server. And yes, we're using Pro, Go, or WebDirect is really what that should say. But it's saying it's not server.
Get host application versions blank if you're not hosted.
Yeah.
Thus, the pattern count with server will fail.
Well, yeah,
it won't be greater than zero. The host application version, the middle one, it won't be greater than zero. It will be equal to zero. Thus, it will fail.
Right. If it's this detects if it's running locally, right? If you're running the solution locally on so this covers your local situation with that. The bottom one covers that even though it's hosted, that you're not on the server right now. The application version that basically should say get the app that's running this script, right? The app running this script is a Pro or Go or WebDirect. It's not server. And so what it does is, okay, if all those are true, then call the same script all over again on server. And you're like, holy shit, yeah. So that's that wrapper part. So then it runs it again. It's on the server. Yeah. Is it PSOS enabled? Yes. Is it host on server? Yes. But this is no, it's actually not running on a local client. So then it fails and it comes out here and it runs this piece down here. It's beautiful. Now you have to take into account context, right? We always talk about context. I was trying to teach some of our juniors. And context is everything in FileMaker except in a couple minor spots. But what is context? What layout, what file you're in, what layout you're on, what record you're on, what your found set is, what your sort state is, and technically, what if you have an object that's activated or in focus, that would also be part of your context. Although I try not to write that sensitive. Cool. Wrapper's nice. Yeah, Ruben, that's a good one, right? And so Margaret's gonna pull this file. We're gonna give it to you folks. The thing that the wrapper doesn't necessarily do is it preserves the context of where you're at. Because understand that if you run it and it runs locally, because say it fails to activate on the server, the local run here is going to be with the local client knowing the local context. So it's all good. It always will work great for that. Slower, but great. But if you actually activate over here, one thing when you do this is script parameter, you need to make sure you pass what you need to do to establish that you have the context figured out one way or the other, right? Maybe you pass the context here to it, and then down here you reestablish the context regardless, right? Down here you always assume, maybe we always assume context is lost, so reestablish context from script parameter, right? And so if you did that in this little section here, then it would always work, right? Like super duper duper work. You just have to make sure that you pass the context, right? Layout, sort state, whatever, right? Once again, if you're a beginning person, this is black magic. If you're an intermediate developer, if I say context, you should understand that. So Andy, you're totally good on context, right? You get all that with FileMaker, right? Yeah. It's like a view a little bit. Well, want to make sure we get that. So Lynn from Austin. Lynn, are you there? I want to make sure that we answer Lynn's questions about the basic audit. Margaret, is your basic audit thing kind of ready to demo a little bit?
I've remapped it as much as I can remap it. So.
All right, so let me show Lynn from this. I'm going to pivot, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to.
It might not work. I don't.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot to showing it on the BVA application real quick, and that because I know that one works because I rolled that out with the customer. All right, so real quick on this. So the idea with an audit, the audit trail, what we were trying to do, and I kind of went round and round circles on this a little bit, was that I was over in a part of an application and I wanted to track certain areas where customers were making edits. Does that make sense? So the customer is the maintenance folks. You've seen me there in their location. It's 110 degrees in that building right now. I'd rather not be in their unconditioned building at the moment. I'm such a wuss, right? So, but that idea is that if you go to layout mode here, we're going to go to layout mode. Mark, if you want to just make sure you exit out so I don't run into you here. But I've got the little stars on here, which are the script triggers. Once again, an object level script trigger. Script triggers are either file specific, layout specific, or object on the layout specific. If you click on an object, you would think that the attribute would be over here on the right side. It's not. The attribute is buried under, you have to right click it and say script trigger. It really should be script triggers on here. So here's the aircraft model number, right? So let's do that. So I'll do script triggers, and we have a script trigger called on object exit. It's going to run a trigger, update, parent record, do this other thing. It also does a log. And so the idea is that it's very simple that on modification, like here's another one over here. Let me try this one. Script triggers. Yeah, on object, on generic modify, it's going to run this script right here. So the idea is on object modify, as you type characters, it's not doing it's not on object keystroke, it's on object modify. Object keystroke is individual characters. You don't really want the script firing every time someone types, especially if they're typing a sentence or something, right? It's unnecessary. It's unnecessarily exciting, we'll say. So they go to scripts. I'm going to take a look over here on object generic. And the idea right here is that if the script parameter that we pass to here is not the same as the field context, then we're going to, that means that there was an edit, edit was performed, right? It performed an edit. Then we're going to run this script right here, which is this generic log entry, and it writes a log. Now, what I want to do on this, though, however, is we perform it on the server. So what I do is I pass, so this is really great. So the script that we're going to run, I'll just look at it real quick, but script 3101 doesn't particularly matter. None of this is overly complicated. It's fairly simple. That's why it's called minimal audit logging, kind of for beginners and intermediates, is that it doesn't universally apply to the whole layout. It's specifically targeted, but it has a performance hook to it. And so the idea is that you get the benefit from that performance. So I'm not terribly worried about people tripping audits, because all I do is package up the material they have. So if I come down here and I say edit, this is the telemetry. It's a JSON element. I didn't invent this. This came from other people. So if I move that over there, you can still see my face. But what I'm doing is I'm capturing the script, the process, the name. I'm capturing the client, some other things like that. I actually can decide if I want to force a line feed on the log, right? Sometimes in a log, I mean, like Jacob is probably a log purist, but he's always looking for seams in the log. A seam in a log is some sort of event where something crashes and something you need to find. Those are they're gaps in the timeline, right? Something like that. And so for me, I can force kind of a visual seam in the log if something really important happens. So I know if someone edits this field right here, I say no line feed, pre and post. I put those in there myself, because I wanted to be able to control if I was going to kind of form a visual seam in this thing. So it rolls all this stuff up. This is all generic right here. And then what I call big valley aviation specific telemetry, this is the that's specific to their solution. The rest of this is kind of generic. This is down here is what their work order is, what their paperwork thing is, some other paperwork. That's an internal ID of the database. They don't use that. Once again, a lot of us use UUIDs. Customers don't want to use UUIDs. What work order, what invoice are you on? Alpha 31 exclamation point pound backslash AAA, and then little AAA, right? No one does like that. So I log this because I need it, but they wouldn't see it. right? And then that's the IN number of the aircraft, which is always in North America, it's an IN number. In Canada, it's a C number. And then in everywhere, there's always like a little leading character or two, tells you what country you're in, right? I think HX is Switzerland or something, right? So IN is I think North America. Actually, Canadians, I don't. Well, Canadians sometimes use a different number too. So anyway, that's the point is I'm off in the weeds because I start talking about helicopters. But that is the telemetry. So we roll all this up and capture these get functions, and then we tell the script to run on PSOS. So the PSOS spins up. Remember, PSOS always runs the startup script. It always runs this closing script. So your on first window, on your last closing. So it does some unnecessary stuff. So your first on start window, your first startup script needs to check if it's on server. If so, exit so you don't waste time running a startup stuff. And then it's going to go to the log table, create a new record, create the line feeds, load the data in there, and then that script will finish. And it will then run the closing script. Once again, you don't have to worry about that because the server's doing it for you. What we do is what we call fire and forget. So we're going to fire this, and we are going to wait for completion off. Because what am I going to tell the user? Because they've already gone on. Say the server's busy and this is backed up a little bit, and then 10 seconds later it does this. How is the user going to remediate this issue? They can't. I mean, and generally creating a new record in a table is not something prone to failure. Editing records, you can get a record lock, right? Think about the obvious things we run into. Someone else editing the record, you editing the record on a different computer. I ran into that 5 minutes ago, right? Someone else editing the record, you editing the record. What are the chances of it not being able to create a new record in an audit? Unless the permissions are screwed up on your Linux or your Mac computer, or the hard drive's full, which the whole server's crashed, that should work pretty reliably. So I don't worry about that too much. So let's take a look at that. So this is the script that we do. This is the one that runs we could run it locally. We could run it on the server, okay? But now, remember I did the wrapper a little bit ago. You say, Richard, why didn't you use the wrapper on that? Because the wrapper fundamentally waits for execution, right? It does, right? Because it fires on the server. Well, I guess you could do it without waiting for execution, right? You could run it locally if available, and then not wait for it. You could do that on that. For me, I didn't really want to slow the client down, and that process is so reliable that I've yet to really run into a situation that the PSOS wasn't running. That makes sense. But you can have, so all of you understand PSOS clients that run on the server, when they fire up, it actually is a user that spawns into existence, and the FileMaker server sees it, even though it's the same computer, it's a different process. FileMaker server sees PSOS running, and if 10 different users fire PSOS, you'll get 10 different clients that suddenly spawn to life to do, and then they disconnect. So by default, Claris kind of monkeys with these settings a little bit based upon your license a little bit, but they will set the maximum number of PSOS clients that can fire at one time. So say, for example, the default is like 100 PSOS clients. If you try to request number 101, 100 of them are going, and you request 101, it doesn't stack in a queue and wait for completion, it fails. So that's a situation where you'd want to trap for that error of calling it, right? Call the, so we got 3,100 here. I'm just going to make an edit on here so it shows up. Let me get rid of that. Go back to this one right here. You could do a get if, right, and then get last error. And so if you tried to call it and immediately failed, then we could detect that in here, right? But then once again, in this situation, do I want to have the client write the log locally and slow them down, or do I just want to not worry about it? It depends. For me, I'm leaving little breadcrumbs about what the user is doing in the system. It's not like a medical application where there's legal requirements for tracking what people do, and if someone does something kind of questionable, the government's going to come descend upon them on their heads, right? For me, I'm collecting telemetry on how my users are using the solution. The reality is I want to see what the hell they're doing. If I could actually have a recording of their screen and watch them do that, I would do that. Because it's not so much they're idiot, they're brilliant, they're smart people, but they're going to find new and unique ways to break your that you didn't think about. And so what I like to do, I love sitting in the back of the room, and they hate it because they think I'm critiquing them. I said, no, I'm sitting back here watching you use it to see how you're breaking my right? Or maybe they don't break it and you anticipate what they're doing. You get your pat on the back, makes you feel good, right? So why we have audits, audit trails of a vast variety of different reasons, but of a lightweight audit of tracking specific user changes can be very valuable. If I go over here and I go to the home screen, I go down here to what I call the secondary nav over here, and then I click on view logs over here. So you will see this pop up over here. This is my log screen over here with this improved. And so you see these lines in here. These are forcible seams that I've injected kind of in here. And Jacob will be like, hey, that's too many. Yeah, but it works for me. And so there's probably a batch of things that are going on here. And then the user logged out. The user didn't log out. That monkey bread plugin saw that they were idle and ran a script that didn't necessarily, well, that one is a log out, but where they idle timeout, right? So the user log in, they start up, enable the timer, diagnostic failed. That's interesting. Diagnostic check failed. Service may not be run or was overloaded. I'll have to check on that. So what we do is when we start up starting point, we run a script to test that A, we see if we're requesting PSOS, and B, we call it to see if there's an error. Almost never do I get an error. And even if I get an error, it's only temporary. Here I called it, it failed. And I don't know why. What was that? Was that today? That was today.
What does your PSOS check do?
Would you like to investigate that? Shall we investigate that together? Let's do that.
I don't know. If you want, it's a demo if you want to.
Yeah, no, it's
I look at stuff like that. I don't see failures like that too much. So it's
it's kind of
becomes my question of like what is it doing? Like what does failure mean?
This
right?
is a standard startup script and starting point. All of you have this somewhere. So I'm going to go to script 0001, 3001. Yep, startup. We're going to come down here. We're going to look for something to see. And there's some calendar bullshit in here. Set some globals. We pre-navigate to some layouts so the users have already cached the layout, so its performance is faster when they start going. Check to see if PSOS is functional. Here we go. So let's check on this. Okay, is this? Oh, okay. This is the same code from the wrapper, right? Recognize that? Then it's going to attempt to run this script right here. And we have to wait for completion, right? So if we really want to see what happens, we have to wait for completion, okay? And it fails, right? So we'd say error, it fails. And there are a handful of errors with PSOS that are specific errors, Jacob. I never really bothered to know the numbers because knowing Claris, they'd probably add different numbers or get rid of numbers. And it's better just to trap for, remember error, and that's the difference between 360works plugins, 360works products, or other coding. Andy could probably validate this. Most programming languages and things, no error is a 1, okay? In the world of Claris, no errors are 0. So because 360works are conventional programmer type people who do a lot of Java, back with Java, like not JavaScript, but Java, and they still use that quite a bit. Their internal errors, if you get an error, get last error with 360works products, if you get a 1, that's good. On FileMaker, it's a 0, so that you have to make sure you're coding for the right platform. Kind of frustrating, but not equal to 0 means that there was an error here. There is an error. Something happened, and what it does, we test it. It fails. So then your client in a global variable knows that it should. The rest of that session will not be asking for PSOS at all. If that makes any sense, right? So that's kind of what we do with that. It runs on every startup. If I ran it right now, it'd be fine. But it was interesting that Margaret got that error. Let me see. If I do a search for failed, copy, find, failed. How many fails we have? Well, a whopping 2 over however many months. 1 from 3 days ago. I mean, that's a different error there. That's me testing the SYN-Grid stuff. So we've had 2 PSOS failures, one from their financial lady a couple days ago and one from Margaret today. Other than that, there have been no PSOS errors, which is interesting. So, and that's also interesting because this is our first Ubuntu Graviton ARM-based processor computer, right?
That's kind of why I was asking about why PSOS might be
Yeah,
failing.
now I know why you're interested. Why are you interested?
Yeah.
So
I
now
was fishing. Yeah.
I have seen this before other places. This used to be more of a problem back, I don't know. I very rarely
Previously. Yeah.
back
Before
on Mac
16.
servers, yeah. Back in FileMaker 14, 15, 16 on the Mac, you'd see this more often than you wanted to see it. So that's not entirely so.
Previously, this stuff was fairly unreliable. I've been probably riskily, but just writing stuff to run on server now, and that mostly, I mean, I don't know, maybe I just don't see the failures, I guess,
Yeah. Well, what we
So-
did, so here's the deal. What we did with this, we made a couple assumptions here. We say, is the file being hosted, 1, on a server? 2, are we not on that server? If so, during the startup process, let's run a script to see if this works. So run script 20. I don't even know what script 20 is. What is script 20? Go to audit log and set some variables and do some things. So it's writing that audit log entry, the same kind of at script 3101, it's running that again, right? So we keep calling the same audit log script over and over and over again. And then we keep passing these, recognize this, right? So we keep passing this kind of stuff here. So this should be very similar to what's in starting point. Remember, this big value aviation came from starting point light 23x1 from like 5 months ago. So we run it. If it fails, then we set the rest of the sessions being off. What I've determined, Jacob, is that sometimes when PSOS fails, it's temporary. It's a transient failure in nature. It's not going to auto recover itself. When it fails, it's a hard fail. But in a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, if you ran that check again, it wouldn't fail.
In later versions.
I don't, so.
No, I was just going to say in later versions of 19, they have made the angel behavior, the angel process behavior, that's what you'd call it, not in FileMaker. The management that automatically turns things that have crashed back on again, right? In an attempt to recovery. Yeah, that's in general, the general term for that is like an angel process, or a whatever, but it's meant to be like over, looking down on your children sort of thing. I don't know why it's called that. I'm sure there's some cool history from 50 years ago, but in any case, they have made that more reliable and more aggressive over time to try and keep the different parts of FileMaker server, if they shut down, crash, fail for some interesting reason or whatever, to try and boot those things back up again automatically. And so you'll see that where there will be more transient errors, basically errors that are there for a minute or 3 or 15 seconds or whatever, and then it goes, something's wrong, and kicks it over. So
I want to welcome Rick Fosnot from sunny Avalon, New Jersey. I think that might be a joke. I don't think you guys have sunny days there right now? I think you're having some bad weather. Michelle Gravel from Montreal, welcome. Media Sandbox says, I would argue that PSOS is beyond the intermediate level. I don't necessarily agree with that. If you don't want to use it, that's fine, but it's pretty straightforward. The hard part of managing PSOS is not so much this issue of it not activating. It's pretty, really, it's a peripheral edge case issue. But it's the context issue. You got to understand context. If you're an intermediate FileMaker developer, remember I define intermediate FileMaker developer as someone with at least 1 to 3 years of serious FileMaker experience, right? And you're not necessarily certified, but you can. I know people who, and I'm not picking on anyone here, but I know people who've been doing FileMaker for 20 or 30 years, never get beyond the intermediate to maybe a little bit better than intermediate stage because they learn everything they need to learn. Right? And they definitely use PSOS, but they'll stay away from SQL, they'll stay away from JavaScript and things like that because they don't want to go down that road and learn that stuff. It doesn't mean they shouldn't, it just means that they're comfortable and they're having a good career and making good money doing what they do, right? Does that make sense? So.
Well, next question from Andy, which It's a hell of a question to take on with 3 minutes to go, but I'll drop it in here. How are relationships handled in FileMaker? He did ask that a while ago. He asked that like 30 minutes ago. We just got to it.
Okay, can you do me a favor? I would be happy to answer the question, but can you shoot me an email and just flesh out how it's handled in FileMaker, like in what, like
versus SQL is what he's having an issue with. Why is there one table occurrence per layout and not as SQL, one table for all relations as the graph says? Because he uses an SQL server.
Because you got ERDs in SQL and you also have views in SQL, and those two things are combined together kind of in a weird way, or whatever you want to call it, in a different way in FileMaker, and that's the table occurrence graph that we have, right? So it's a combination of views and relationships together, right? And so did I answer that as well as I could, Jacob? Would you like to take a swing at that? Because you have an SQL background.
Yeah. My basic answer is just it's a different the features are combined differently. And it's not an SQL system. So we have functionally infinite views. That's how I think of and treat like TOs, basically, because we have base tables. That'd be the SQL table or something like that.
Yep.
But we have a graphical environment. Like that's how I treat the database graph, is a graphical environment for making infinite views. And it's not like a total view. It isn't like, we can combine arbitrary data and do like, that's an SQL thing. But what we can do is attach any reasonable table to any other reasonable table for the purposes of pulling data. And I don't know. I mean, SQL can kind of do that too, but it's different. So
follow-up question. Okay, so a TO, a table occurrence, equals a database view or DB view, and therefore all data is loaded.
What is data is loaded? I don't know what that phrase means. You got to use more words.
Yeah, we should have him. You know what we should do is get him on the Zoom call and have him ask these questions, and we can come back and take a swing at them.
Yeah, I'm happy to do like a little pepper question thing, because he's had some good ones. He's had some good ones.
You guys have great questions. That's what I'm talking about. You have great questions. These are great. Can we get Andy? Andy, are you willing to come on and ask the questions? You're not like an AI bot, are you?
The Andy. He said sure.
Okay, good. I don't know if you need the answers today or not, because we're kind of out of time and it's Friday. And
it's an interesting topic because we usually only talk about FileMaker from the point of view of people who are totally new to coding in general, not people who are already coming in with a vast quantity of experience in a totally different system.
You know, we could do that, Jacob. We could do but the problem is I'd need someone else to help carry the water mostly on that. I mean, you're a big part of that. Who else would we have to come on the show to talk about? Like if you're thinking about FileMaker from another database realm or world, right? Who would we be? What would you guys folks suggest for the guest speakers for that? Okay, Andy just laid a bunch of great questions on us. Us doing a show on kind of trying to wrap your head around FileMaker. If you're not a new programmer, but you have experience in other data systems, how do we wrap your head around that? Right? Maybe we get Chris Moyer to come in on that. That might be another one to get him. Margaret, you want to reach out to him on that?
I can ask him. Yeah, it's been a while.
He would have many things to say there. He was playing around with Mongo last time, so.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we're going to be working on that next week. We got Nick Hunter and we got 2 days of Christian Schmidt. And then the week after that, or somewhere about 2 or 3 weeks out, we'll schedule this. If you folks have questions, please send us an email to support@rcconsult.com and just say for Richard or for Margaret or for Jacob or whatever. And it'll get the team will see it and they'll triage it and set it aside for us. If you have ideas or topics, Andy, great questions. Fantastic. That's why I said, if you have the questions, 100 people who are going to watch this over the next month or so, about 500 people a month watch these videos over the course of the next 30 days. And they have these questions. Okay. So I need to see the world through your eyes. Can you help me see things your way a little bit? And then I can help answer questions. And maybe you'll convince me that something I'm doing is totally wrong and I'll change the way we do it. All right, cool. That's it, everyone. Have a good weekend. We'll see you back here Monday with Nick Hunter.
OCR related. So if you have OCR shenanigan, right, you should pop in.
OCD or OCR?
OCR. I mean, Nick might also have OCD considering
he's an artist. He has that. It's OCR and OCD on Monday with Nick. We'll see you then.
got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.